I know we're still in the middle of the season. We haven't even hit the All-Star break yet, but given where the Bulls are at, all the changes that were made at the deadline, the shift in focus and direction, I can't help but myself focus on what's going to come this offseason, because let's be real, that's what we're all looking forward to. There isn't really that much to look forward to watching the rest of the season outside of seeing the development of some of these young players, most notably Manas Bucelis, Jaden Ivey, and Josh Giddey. And what's interesting about the Bulls taking this new direction, this rebuild approach, whatever you want to call it, is that it means despite all of the changes made at the deadline, there are likely even more changes to come, as they still have 7 expiring contracts on their books. They only have an estimated $93 million of guaranteed money on their payroll for next season. Some of that being team options that they could opt out of, although it's unlikely that they would, given 2 of the team options are Manas Bucelis and Rob Dillingham. But at $93 million going into next season, that would still leave them with $73 million in cap space based on the league's projected salary cap for next season at $166 million. That said, this doesn't account for the Bulls' upcoming draft pick in 2026, which presumably is going to be a lottery pick, we hope. If the Bulls somehow get lucky and that pick goes into the top 4, that salary figure on the rookie scale deal is going to be even more. But more importantly, it also doesn't factor in to the Bulls' calculus on how much they're going to be willing to pay all of their upcoming free agents that are currently on their roster, assuming they want to extend any of them. The main ones being Jaden Ivey, who will be a restricted free agent, Simons, Colin Sexton, who will be unrestricted free agents. Now, look, we already know that AK is essentially using the rest of the season as a tryout to see who will make the cut to stay on this team and who they would let go. And we know that despite their best efforts to try and be bad and tank the rest of the season, most of these guys are going to be fighting for contracts and trying to perform at their absolute best, which, as I've said before, could lead the Bulls to really just stay where they are in the standings, because the guys on the floor, they still want to compete. But be all that as it may, it got me thinking a lot about this offseason and really what will make or break this team going forward, how they get out of the middle, what will set them up for success, and what could potentially set them back for years. So what's going on, everyone? You're listening to Bulls Central here. Hope you're all doing well. Now, I'm going to start with the positives, because I feel like, there's been a lot of negativity going on around this team, myself included. I've been critical about what the hell this team is doing and what their direction is going forward coming out of the trade deadline. But what I mean by positives is in the sense of what the Bulls currently have at their disposal and can use to their advantage in turning this thing around relatively quickly. Now, of course, the quickest way you can turn this thing around and completely reshape the trajectory of your franchise is getting lucky in the lottery and landing the number 1 pick. And even a top 3 pick in general should accelerate the Bulls' ability to become relevant again when this class is projected to not only be deep, but the top 3 are expected to be franchise-altering players. Now, of course, as I've always said, you really never know how a given projected generational talent is going to do once they actually get to the NBA. People thought that about the likes of Andrew Wiggins and Ben Simmons as franchise-changing players before they entered the draft, but landing a top 3 pick would be a massive, massive win for the Bulls. The problem for the Bulls, though, is that as of right now, and likely their best odds of getting the number 1 pick with the 10th worst record in the league, is 3%, with a near 14% of moving up into the top 4. So we're going to assume that the Bulls are going to get the 10th pick in this year's draft, which is the most likely outcome as of right now. They would have about a 65% chance of getting the number 10 pick. So the positives here is, 1, the Bulls would still have a top 10 pick in what is expected to be one of the deepest classes in over a decade. Scouts are saying you're going to get a great player if you get a top 10 pick, but also there is a world where the Blazers could make the playoffs. They would have to do it by way of the play-in, but given the fact that the Grizzlies have folded their season, same with the Mavericks, the Blazers will be in the play-in, and despite the fact they're a young team, a scrappy young team, there is an outside chance that they could take out these old teams like the Clippers and the Warriors on a bad day and somehow land the number 8 seed. And if that's the case, it would also mean the Bulls would get the 15th or maybe 16th pick in the draft, depending on where the Blazers finish in the standings. And then on top of that, don't forget, they also got a pretty valuable pick from the Celtics in the Vucevic deal, 2nd round pick coming from the Pelicans, which is expected to be somewhere in the 31 to 34 range, around there, because the Pelicans are one of the worst teams in the league. So if the Bulls do in fact walk away from this draft with 3 picks, more bites of the apple, as people like to say. This helps position them to add more young talent to fit their current timeline and more talent on cost-controlled contracts, which would give them even more flexibility from a cap sheet perspective. Now, when we talk about cap space, how much money the Bulls would have available at their disposal and trying to upgrade there, I'm not personally as optimistic about what they can do because this free agency class isn't that great, with a lot of the big names having already signed extensions. Like, yes, LeBron James is going to be a free agent, but he's not going to make sense for the Bulls at his age. That's if he even stays in the league and decides not to retire. James Harden could be a free agent if he declines his player option. Same with Zach LaVine, I might add. Then it's guys like CJ McCollum, Chris Middleton, Porzingis. Like, none of these players make sense for the Bulls based on their current direction and timeline. But some players that do intrigue me, especially if we're talking about a scenario where the Bulls have 3 draft picks in this upcoming draft. One is Tari Eason, who is a restricted free agent, so the Rockets would have the ability to match any offer that he gets. And we do know the Rockets value Eason a great deal, as they should. He's a great defender, big-time hustle player, and he's developed his jump shot to the point where he's one of the best three-point shooters in the league right now, shooting a ridiculous 48% from 3 on 4.7 attempts per game. To me, if you're the Bulls, because you have so much cap space and because you need more bigs, more defensive-minded players, this is the restricted free agent where you kind of go all in on and make the Rockets squirm a little bit in forcing them to match that offer. Because the Rockets don't have that much room to work with, given their current cap sheet and the amount they have guaranteed on their books for the coming years. While I'm sure they like Eason, I don't think they're going to be willing to pay Eason over $25 million a year and be a perpetual apron team thereafter. And while I think that's rich for the Bulls to hand over Eason that kind of money, especially with his injury concerns, they have so much cap space and are in such need for a player of his skill set that they almost have to pursue it if they want to turn this thing around and start competing as early as next season. Even at that salary, though, the Bulls would still have sufficient cap space to sign other players. Isaiah Hartenstein is another guy that if the Thunder decline his team option and let him hit unrestricted free agency, is a player the Bulls should absolutely pursue as their new starting center who can crash the offensive glass and protect the rim. Another big need for the Bulls. Another restricted free agent I'm actually interested in, who fits the mold of what the Bulls need when it comes to big-time energizers on defense, is Jeremy Sohan. Not a big contract, though, hopefully on a team-friendly deal, as I don't think the Spurs are going to look to re-sign him, and the Bulls might not have to worry about a scenario where the Spurs are just going to match the offer. And then, of course, the other question is, well, who are the Bulls going to sign on their current roster? They've got all these free agents, one of them restricted free agent in Jaden Ivey. Who's coming back, and how do you factor that into your overall cap projections if you are in fact looking to sign guys like Eason, Isaiah Hartenstein, or Jeremy Sohan? Now, the good thing is because the Bulls have the bird rights of all their current players, at least I believe they have the bird rights for all their expiring contracts anyway, they can use their salaries to actually operate over the cap as long as it stays below the luxury tax, because the Reinsdorfs never pay the luxury tax. But for me, in an ideal world, and I know this is tough because both of these guys have looked decent from what we've seen thus far, but you let Sexton and Simons walk, you just take the second round picks that you got in the deals from them and leave it at that. Yeah, maybe you can work out a sign and trade of some kind, but those are easier said than done. I think it would be a mistake to re-sign either of those guys as their skills are a bit redundant. They're going to command decent paydays, probably more than they're worth. It's not going to up-level your team, and it's going to eat into your cap space when there are free agents who are going to have more complementary skills relative to your needs and who are going to fit your age timeline. I do think they should sign Jaden Ivey because there is still upside with him, and you can likely get him on a pretty team-friendly deal given his injury history. And then to end off the quote-unquote positives and what the Bulls could and should do to try and get back to a state of relevancy, if the Portland pick does convey and is 15 or 16, and the Bulls also get the number 10 pick, their own pick, they should look to package their 3 picks, 10, 15, and 32, whatever it is that they get from the Pelicans, to try and move up to like 5 or 6. Yeah, maybe in this type of draft, that won't be enough to move up that high, but when you have multiple picks and only so many roster spots, it makes sense to try and consolidate and move further up to get the guy that you want. The other thing, too, is that the Bulls, as of right now, have 13 second-round picks. There is a world where they can try and package 4 or 5 of those picks into a first-round pick, even if it's a late first-rounder, to give them more future assets at their disposal to either use as a future trade chip or, of course, use to make selections to add young players to the roster. So while, yes, the Bulls are still not in an ideal scenario where they find themselves right now, and they still have so much work to do this offseason. There are ways in which they could really try to get on the right path and get back to being competitive again. Do I have confidence that the front office can do that? That's a whole other question entirely, which leads me into how things could go drastically wrong and what I sincerely hope the Bulls do not do this offseason. One, rather than the Bulls using their cap space to bring in players that are actually going to elevate their roster or at least provide positional needs and fit their timeline, rather than doing that, they simply extend the likes of Sexton, Simon, Zach Collins, Yabusele, Nick Richards, etc., essentially keeping the roster intact and extending them on less than favorable deals. Now, I'm not necessarily opposed to extending Richards or Collins on team-friendly deals, as the Bulls can always use extra bigs, especially when they don't have a clearly defined starting center. But the injury concerns with Collins do have me concerned when it comes to a possible extension for him. But if the Bulls go down this route of extending Sexton and Simons, particularly Simons, because while he's been solid, has had a great season, one of the better three-point shooters in the league, he's going to command a lot of money. He doesn't fit the Bulls timeline either, and he's not going to take your team to the next level and is likely going to take shots and opportunities away from some of your younger guys. And then, of course, the other piece too, and it's honestly what has been maddening about the Bulls now deciding to go down this tanking route when it's already too late to do so and selling too late on all their assets when their values have gone down significantly. But that's the Bulls just sitting on their second-round picks, don't do anything with them. And what I mean by that is packaging their plethora of second-round picks and trying to turn them into first-rounders. First-rounders where in this upcoming draft or next year's draft would get higher-end talent that is going to align with the timeline of Giddey, Modest, Jaden Ivey, etc. But to me, that's my worst nightmare. One, the Bulls don't move up in the draft lottery. In fact, worst-case scenario, they slip back a spot or two and land the number 11 or number 12 pick. Portland misses the playoffs, that pick doesn't convey, and then they also don't do anything to try and consolidate some of their second-round picks into at least one first-round pick. Like everyone's talking about, hey, you couldn't even get one first-round pick with all these trades. Make up for it by packaging some of these seconds that you have in your arsenal. And then, of course, the other worst-case scenario too, the Bulls go down this route of signing free agents that make zero sense for them. Like some of the older veterans, like a CJ McCollum as an example, because they can get him on a cheap deal and no one else wants them. That is what I fear most. That is the nightmare scenario of essentially keeping this team in the middle and never getting out of it. Bulls need to make smart, calculated free agency signings that fit their timeline and needs from a skills and positional standpoint, and then doing their best to leverage their draft capital to move up in the draft, and then, of course, hitting on their selections. Now, will the Bulls actually do this? I don't have much confidence that they will, but getting out of the middle isn't going to be done by simply holding onto this roster and not being aggressive with their picks. I would love to hear what you guys think, though. You let me know in the comments. As always, be sure to subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.